And good afternoon, everybody. This is Emar Soper, too. Welcome to another edition of the Sports Inquirer Show. We're recording this on Monday, June 17th, 2019. Hopefully you've had a good weekend. I know I did, and we'll go over all the things that took place over the past few days. But as always, if you want to follow everything that we're doing, head to thesportsinquirer.net, premier site for news and notes in the world of sports. We recently put up some interviews that we did with Atlanta United 2 after their match against Pittsburgh. Wasn't a good match for United, but we were able to get some excellent content from head coach Stephen Glass and also Captain Jack Metcalf and Mikey Ambrose as well, who's doing some rehab time with the United 2 team as he works his way back up for the first team. So we're able to get all of that for you. Make sure you check that out. We also did another edition of the Verbal Submission podcast. Very excited about bringing that back, and we went over a lot of wrestling notes on that show. So if you want to hear more of my thoughts on WWE, AEW, mixed martial arts as well, make sure you check that side out, and New Japan as well. We recapped the Dominion show they did last week in Okada. So, or I think it was, where was it? It was in Japan. I do know that. I don't remember the exact city it was in, but we did a recap of that show and Super Show in Saudi Arabia. So we did all of that stuff. So very excited about having that up. So we also had to Twitter and Instagram, Sports Inquirer, all one word. You can do a search there, and that'll be a good way to get all of our up-to-date content as far as our social media platforms. Facebook, The Sports Inquirer, all one word. Those are separate words, actually. And if you're having some issues with the Facebook, I'm going to resolve it. Looks like there are two versions of our page on Facebook. So if you've been looking for The Sports Inquirer, that's usually where everything goes. But there's been a separate one with Sports Inquirer, all one word. I'm working on trying to resolve that, merge them together. But if you're going to Facebook, make sure you look up The Sports Inquirer, separate words, and that's the main site to head to. But if you head to Sports Inquirer as well, it's uploading some of our Instagram videos. So if you want to go there as well, that's fine. It's not a big deal. But if you're just having some confusion with that, just want to clarify it. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube and SoundCloud under The Sports Inquirer. Those are separate words. That is a good way to get all of our archived content from our past shows, from Sports Inquirer Show. We've done Verbal Submission, as I've mentioned, and all of the videos that we do, interviews and pressers. You can go to our YouTube page, and that's a great way to get up to date on that. And then SoundCloud as well. All of our archived audio shows, specifically the podcast and some audio interviews, mainly the podcast from the Inquirer Show that you're listening to now, to Verbal Submission, and some other ones that we have coming up. Head to SoundCloud and do a search there. Subscribe to us, and you'll get all of our up-to-date stuff. As far as today's show, we're going to focus on several things. We're going to start with the NBA. The finals concluded since our last show, so I have to discuss the Toronto Raptors winning the finals over Golden State and all the implications that has in the NBA and all professional basketball. The Anthony Davis trade, big deal for Los Angeles Lakers and the New Orleans Pelicans. I'll break that down. Also, the Offside Trap. Discuss Atlanta United and their activities. Also, the Women's World Cup has started and has interesting analysis of the United States women's team and their performance so far. I have thoughts on that. And then finally, in the miscellaneous department, we're going to break down the U.S. Open, the men's golf tournament. Took place this weekend. Tyson Fury and his victory over Tom Schwartz and what it means for the heavyweight division and boxing on television on ESPN Plus, a different platform. And finally, concluding the miscellaneous department, I'll talk about what I'm watching on Netflix. I was in a lot of the weekend, so I caught up on 3 different shows, and I have some thoughts on what I saw on there. So we're going to take our first break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss NBA Finals in the Stagger Screen portion of our show here on the Sports Inquirer Show. All right, welcome back to the show. Emar Soper with you. Yeah, let's break down the NBA Finals in our Stagger Screen portion to start it off. The Toronto Raptors won the NBA Finals in the 4-2 series win over the Golden State Warriors. Let's look at it from both sides in this perspective. For Toronto side, there's no asterisk. The title was earned. We're so quick to judge and put out different reasons and scenarios and situations, and we'll break down the Golden State side. Injuries were a factor. We'll break down Durant and Thompson and all of that. But injuries are a part of sports. You have physical activity between opponents. Ankles are going to get twisted, knees are going to get blown out, Achilles are going to tear. It's an unfortunate part. If everyone was healthy and 100%, that wouldn't be the beauty of sports. You wouldn't see the battle of wills and overcoming adversity and why a lot of us watch the sport itself. It's going to happen. Now, having in the NBA Finals in this scenario, while it's happened before with certain teams, we've seen different teams have injuries at this stage of the season. To be fair, Durant and Thompson going down at the stages of the NBA Finals was very bad, but Toronto should not take an asterisk or take any shame in claiming the title. And I saw the parade with hundreds of thousands of people in downtown Toronto. I don't think there's any guiltiness or guilt in them taking the championship, as it shouldn't be like that. The growth of basketball in Canada, I'm old enough to remember when the expansion of the NBA into Canada took place with the Toronto Raptors and the Vancouver Grizzlies. And I follow professional hockey, so I was familiar with Toronto, Vancouver, and the provinces, Alberta, and then with Calgary, Edmonton, and some of the cities like Winnipeg and Quebec and Montreal. So I was familiar with the cities themselves and kind of had a map of how Canada lays out based on what division or conference they were in as far as professional hockey goes. But for a lot of other people, it was, even though they're directly above us in the United States, not many people have been to Canada or are familiar with it. So to have two NBA professional teams launch there at the same time was very surprising to a lot of folks, including myself. And the logos and the names, the Raptors, was a dinosaur kind of based on Jurassic Park. And they had this cartoonish character on their jersey. Looked very weird. You had Vancouver, the Grizzlies, with the teal and black, and with a grizzly, a bear. Like what? There have been Grizzlies and Bruins and the Lame Bears before, but it just seemed very odd and kind of very Canadian. And to see them go from less than 30 years, less than 30 years, or more than 30, around that time frame, to go from kind of an afterthought to having the Vancouver Grizzlies move to Memphis, and that be kind of a blow to Western Canada and the growth of the sport there, to now the Raptors being NBA champions. Tremendous development. And it's gone from a novelty to seeing Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady there, bona fide NBA star and future Hall of Famers, and McGrady's in, and Vince Carter will be in whenever he retires, to the Chris Bosh era, to DeRozan and Lowry, and now we have Kawhi Leonard there and being an NBA champion. So seeing that development has been very intriguing, and now you're starting to see a lot of NBA players come from there. It's more than Steve Nash. We've seen Tristan Thompson. We've seen Wiggins. We're seeing a lot of guys come from the Canada, specifically the Toronto area. So this is kind of a culmination of the build-up of the sport in Canada. It's more than curling and ice hockey in the our northern neighbors in Canada. So seeing that development's been very interesting. Even Drake, when you're a major presence, when you have an annoying pop culture person, as a New Yorker, there have been plenty of them, from Spike Lee to all the way down to all these guys that other cities don't like because you have someone representing for your city. So to have Drake now be the representation of Toronto and fans and people all around the world literally disliking him for it, you've arrived as a major city or a major part of the world when you have that happen to you. So very interesting to see that. The game itself, Kawhi Leonard, top three development for him. You can argue Durant, LeBron, and Kawhi as the three best players in the NBA. And this is going to be a really big year for him because I think you have Durant obviously dealing with his Achilles injury. LeBron, he's trying to have a bounce back year after last year, this past season, with the Lakers not go well for him. Leonard's emerged as definitely the best two-way player in the NBA, and some would say the best overall. And it's a good development for him as well. You look at his career from an unknown mid-round draft pick by the San Antonio Spurs, and a quiet personality going to maybe one of the quietest organizations in all of the NBA. Very good fit for him. And you saw him emerge from a guy who was a power forward who was slow and struggled to shoot to find his way into a defensive force and offensive threat as a three-pointer shooter, win the Finals MVP when the Spurs still had Duncan, Ginobili, and Parker in their lineup. And then the past 2 years have been a roller coaster for him, going from San Antonio, the fallout with that organization, dealing with his leg injuries, and only playing a handful of games last season, having such a bad fallout, the breakup, him getting traded to Toronto for DeMar DeRozan. He's last year of his contract, trying to recover from his injury, going to a foreign place to him, and emerging as an NBA champion. It's a tremendous story. We'll have a lot more time to break down if he's going to stay in Toronto or not over the next few weeks with free agency. But to me, I look at it as maybe the best immediate return on a trade in NBA history. I thought of Rasheed Wallace and his midseason trade with the Detroit Pistons from the Portland Trail Blazers and them winning the championship that season. Kawhi's got to be right there as far as organization like Toronto, who has struggled in the playoffs over the past 5-6 years, being upset, losing, I remember, to the Nets, and having their struggles, losing to Cleveland in the postseason. Now, granted, Cleveland had LeBron, so you could argue that wasn't necessarily an upset, but kind of hitting that ceiling of the Eastern Conference semis in the Eastern Conference Finals and not being able to break through. Leonard goes there. They find the championship. And to credit the rest of the roster as well, Ujiri has done a very good job of building team. Nurse, I was very critical of the firing of Dwayne Casey from the team last year. I thought they were heading in a very good path, but they obviously saw something different. And furthermore, Nurse was an assistant on the team. I thought if you're going to hear a different voice, if you're going to fire Casey for the struggles in the postseason, why would you not go in a different direction instead of promoting Nick Nurse, the assistant coach? But obviously, Nurse is an NBA champion now. He's done a very good job coaching the team. But you look at the roster and the build of it. Obviously, Kawhi is the main force for this season. But the rest of the roster, Lowry, Van Fleet, Siakam, all homegrown in team acquisitions. Strong trade to get Marc Gasol, to give them a presence inside. And he did a very good defensive job in the conference finals with defending Giannis Antetokounmpo from the Bucks and giving Draymond Green all he can handle in the finals. Obviously, Siakam emerging as another strong two-way player on the perimeter. And Van Fleet had some strong moments in the finals. A lot of clutch, or I don't like using the word clutch, very important three-pointers in the series. You could argue that if Kawhi Leonard had not had the postseason that he did, I think accumulating the second most points all time in a postseason, that Van Fleet could have been the MVP. That would have been a very fair argument. So Van Fleet had a very good final and a postseason. And Lowry as well, a player that has been maligned and criticized for not showing up in the postseason. He's been the face of all of those playoff disappointments. He had his best performance of the postseason in Game 6 of the Finals, had the 25, 26 points, contributed on both sides of the court, and was able to help secure that win for the Raptors. So now they're champions. I know they have to deal with the Kawhi deal, and if they're going to bring Gasol back, and Van Fleet and Siakam are going to ask for their money. But all of that doesn't matter. You won a championship, and they'll deal with all that stuff. Golden State itself, we'll get to them right now. Injuries were a factor. You cannot deny it. Durant's Achilles injury in Game 5, my thoughts on that were he was cleared to play. They tested him. He should have played. He's a grown man, too, as well. I've heard all of the stories of he was coerced to play. The Warriors forced him. He was manipulated by social media, trying to show how tough he was and how he's a tough guy and he can perform under pressure and through adversity. If Durant felt that he was not right health-wise, don't play. And you wouldn't be blamed for it. And also, the Achilles and the calf injury, once again, I'm not a doctor. We've said it a lot of times on this show. But the connection between the calf and the Achilles, was he overcompensating, or his body with the calf not being right, and then the Achilles went? Possibly. I'm sure that could have been a scenario. But injuries are going to happen in the sport. When you have grown men, especially Durant, a 7-foot player running up and down the court trying to make cuts, and you saw that's what happened when he came back in Game 5. All those moves were lateral moves. He was moving up and down, jumping, doing open and tip, even doing dunks and layups, dunks during the warm-ups. All of that stuff was straight up and down. When he tried to make a cut, that's when the Achilles went. That's just one of those things where the injury is going to happen, and he'll have to deal with it. Klay Thompson, a torn ACL injury in Game 6. That itself as well, he's going for a dunk, going for a play, lands on his leg awkwardly. The ACL went. Respect to him, though. Not only did he try to come back to play right after that injury, he actually went back on the court, shot the 2 free throws, so he could possibly come back into the game. Because if he was injured, and if someone else had to take the free throws, he cannot return to the game. He went back on the court, took the free throws, and then they did the analysis and the ACL tear. You can argue that if Durant and Thompson were healthy at the start of the series, the Warriors would have won the finals. You could do hypotheticals, and I would agree on paper that most likely would have been the scenario, but that's not what happened. The Raptors, they came into the series. The Warriors, they came with their team. And I know Klay Thompson was hurt in Game 3 as well. People are saying that if he was healthy for Game 3, they could have won the series as well. They just got worn down. They got beat up. And that's just the way sports are. Do I think that the dynasty is tarnished, or is it over? No. They've been in 5 finals, and they've won with this, I say the core group of Thompson and Draymond Green and Curry. They've been to 5 straight finals. They've won 3 of them. They've lost 2. They lost to Cleveland, and they were up 3-1 in that series, interestingly enough. And so they lost that one, and they lost this past year to Toronto. I think that they'll be okay in the future, but this upcoming season is going to be very tough for them. I think Durant with the Achilles and Klay Thompson with the torn ACL, I think both of those guys could be out the entire upcoming season. And what the other quirky part about it is that both guys are free agents. Durant and Thompson, again, Klay is he's a unrestricted free agent. He can go anywhere. Durant has a 1-year option, I believe for $30 million, or in that range. So he could opt into that for 1 year and then test his free agency in the next season. I'm going to assume that he is going to opt out of that and try to get a longer-term deal. So both of those guys can be out in the open. And I think both would have been – they say they're going to be offered the full max, which will put them into the $200 million range for a 5-year deal. I don't know if they could physically afford to do that, or if they do, the luxury tax is going to be tremendous. But you also have to realize they're moving into a new building in San Francisco. That was last game at Oracle in Oakland that they've played in forever. They're going to want to have marquee guys. Curry, he's the marquee guy in that franchise. I mean, Durant's great, and Thompson, they're both future Hall of Famers, especially Durant. You argue he could be a top 10, 15 all-time guy. Curry is the marketable guy for that franchise and makes them go. Now, he did have some shortcomings in the finals, especially Game 6, where they needed him to step up and have a 40-point game, and he just did not do that to win that Game 6. And then Game 7, you never know what can happen. So he had his shortcomings, but still, he's the franchise guy. But they need more than that. You have to and then Marcus Cousins as well. You have to remember he is a free agent also, and he's been up and down, but he looked very well in Game 6, and he's working his way back from not only the Achilles, but dealing with the hamstring as well with his leg injuries. So you have your top 5 guys, 3 of them are dealing with injuries for next season. They're trying to work their way back. Cousins to a lesser degree. Thompson, you could possibly see come back in the regular season. Durant, that might be the entire year. So you have all of that come together, and is it the end of the dynasty? We don't know. As I said, we have plenty of time to speculate on who comes back and what happens in that regard. But you have to say that next year they're not going to be the favorite to win the championship. Who is that favorite? It might be the Los Angeles Lakers. They acquired Anthony Davis from the New Orleans Pelicans for Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart, and 3 first-rounders, starting with the 4th pick in this upcoming draft in 2019. Let's look at it from the Lakers side. They've wanted to make this trade for close to a year now. I would argue that they would like to have made this trade in the last offseason when Anthony Davis switched agencies and went with Clutch Sports, run by Rich Paul, who also happens to be the agent of LeBron James and his childhood friend, and the collusion there is very obvious to see. So I think they want to make this trade from that point, but it didn't work out because I think sides were soured by the hard-handed approach by former executive with the Lakers, Magic Johnson, Rob Pelinka, and that entire crew. You had Will Demps, the previous general manager of the Pelicans, not want to make the trade. However, Demps was relieved of his duties, and then you had David Griffin come in. Who is he? He's a former general manager of the Cleveland Cavaliers, who also happened to have LeBron James while he was there. So a relationship has been established with Clutch Sports and David Griffith and all of that. We have not even a week into the off season, this trade takes place. They want to do it in the middle of this past regular season. It did not go down. A lot of sour feelings on both sides from Davis, him wanting to leave New Orleans and having awkward last 20 games of the year where he only played half of the game, to avoid injury and things like that. With the Lakers, it pretty much severed the relationship between LeBron James and the younger players with Ball and Ingram, Kuzma to a lesser degree, and things like that. So this trade inevitably had to happen for really both parties to move on. The Lakers, I thought, came out well because not only did they get Anthony Davis, who you can argue when he's healthy and on point is a top 5 player in the league. When you have a chance to get that type of talent who is still in his prime right now, you do that. Especially when LeBron James only has really 2 prime years left in his career. It's championships for now for the Lakers. The whole building blocks and trying to get these young guys to develop and get to a championship level, that's not where LeBron is. Maybe if it was LeBron's 8th or 9th year, okay, you can have some of these rookies come along with them and develop and grow. But that time is over. He's entering, I think, his 17th year. They got to win a championship now while he's still at in relative good health. I know he dealt with his injuries as well, but you figure a full off season, no playoffs for the first time in almost a decade, he's going to be rearing and ready to go. They also did not have to give up Kyle Kuzma. I thought that the Pelicans, if they did this trade, had to get Kuzma in the rotation. And we'll get to the Pelicans. I think they may have a different approach to this offseason. But the fact that the Lakers were able to keep Kuzma is very good. Lonzo Ball, inconsistent point guard for the Lakers, just cannot get on the court. And when he was on the court, you saw some solid defense and some good passing, but the shooting woes, especially at the free throw line, for the point guard, below average. And then you added the factor of having to deal with the Ball family, particularly the father, and all of the antics he caused and distractions. You knew he needed to go. And it might be good. It'll be good for Lonzo. We'll get to the Pelican side, but I think it's good for him. Brandon Ingram, he looks the part of a 25-point scorer in the NBA, but it just couldn't be consistent enough with the Lakers. And plus, you add on the blood clot issues that he was dealing with, and they said it's been resolved, and that's good. I mean, the guy is not even 25 yet, so you figure that health should be on his side as far as recovery, but still, you never know what can happen with that. Josh Hart, good gritty player, good perimeter rotation guy that give you something. So for the Lakers, You have Davis and LeBron, Kuzma. That's your big three. They can try to maneuver some things as far as getting another free agent from Kemba Walker, to Jimmy Butler, things on those lines. They can even Kyrie Irving. I've heard. When I say I've heard, I mean it's basics. Who's a free agent? They lost Ball. They need a point guard. Who's the point guard? Kemba Walker, Kyrie Irving. We know Kyrie and LeBron, their past relationship. It makes sense. I think that they're going to go to the approach of trying to get not spare parts, but spread the money out, because they'll end up with like $20 to $25 million in cap space. So maybe they go for a Chris Middleton. Maybe they go for a JJ Redick. Try to get 2 or 3 players within that $20 million range. But we'll see what the Lakers do there. And Vegas is smart. They went from I looked at the odds for to most likely win the NBA championship. The day after the finals, when Thompson, they were questioning if it was an ACL or maybe just a sprain. We all knew it was an ACL just looking at it, but I said we can't diagnose it until it's actually done, or the review of his knee. The Warriors were actually still the favorites to win the championship. Later on that day, with the ACL tear, the Warriors went, I think, about the 5th or 6th favorite, and the Lakers went to number 1. So they knew something was up, and obviously the Davis trade puts them in that position that they are a major contender for a championship. You can't deny what they can offer as far as with Davis and LeBron, and then the loss of Durant and Thompson, at least for the majority of this upcoming season, makes the Lakers one of the favorites in the West. The Pelicans side of things, Davis was in the last year of his contract. You knew he was not going to re-sign with you. You have to get what you can. Boston was not willing to give up Jason Tatum in the trade because they knew it'd be a rental. It'd be a one year in Boston, and then Davis would explore free agency, probably to go to the Lakers, because we've talked about all of the connections with Davis and with his agency and LeBron James. That's just the way it was going to work. So to get Ball and Ingram and Hart, those are 3 good rotation guys that can be in your lineup. I think Ball and Ingram being away from Los Angeles is a good thing. With Ball, his father's always going to be around, yes, but his father is all about California and dealing with those 2 other sons. Ball's going to be a grown man and have to deal with that and just improve his game. He's about a year away from being out of the NBA. Maybe not necessarily out of the NBA, but a rotation guy, not even a starter. So he goes to New Orleans. You got to figure him and Drew Holiday in the backcourt, they can work on that. Ingram's another guy who the shots will be there for him in that lineup, so he needs to make that happen. And Hart, as I said, is a good rotation guy. He'll find his way. You have to figure Zion Williamson's going to be the number 1 pick overall for the Pelicans. So you have Zion and Lonzo, Ingram, along with Holiday. That's not a bad way to start off your team. Julian Randle, he opted out of his contract, so he's going to be a free agent. It'd be good if he can re-sign with the Pelicans. The money should be there for him to sign a nice solid deal, because you got to figure Ingram, Ball, and Zion are all on rookie deals. But we'll see what the market is. NBA is weird. Randle might get offered double by Atlanta, or I'm trying to think of Portland or Phoenix, a team we're not even thinking of, and he has to take the money. But it'd be good if he can stay with New Orleans and build from there. So while I think when you're giving up a top 5 player in the NBA in his prime, you're not going to win the deal. But all things considered, and what the Pelicans had to deal with as far as Anthony Davis and him not returning to the team after this year, I thought it was a very respectable trade for what they're trying to do. And those are my NBA notes as far as everything that's happened. We're going to be continuing to talk about the NBA with this offseason, because free agency is less than 2 weeks away. We have the NBA draft taking place this Thursday on June 20th. So we'll have a lot to talk about with that and everything going on from there. We're going to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss professional soccer and the Women's World Cup and Offside Trap here on the Sports Inquirer Show. All right, welcome back to the Sports Inquirer Show and Offside Trap. Atlanta United had an interesting week on the field, even though they're technically on the international break. We'll start with the first team that started off the week on. Well, let's go back a little bit. They're originally scheduled to have the fourth round at the U.S. Open Cup in Charleston against the Charleston Battery. However, due to inclement weather and bad field conditions, they could not have that match until the 13th. So here's the schedule that they had to deal with. They took a bus on Monday night on June 10th from Atlanta to Charleston. We used to live in Charleston. I lived there a long time ago. Not a bad trip, a boring trip. Beautiful city, but it's not a very fun trip on 20. So they took about a 5.5-hour bus ride to go from Atlanta, Georgia to Charleston, South Carolina to play the match that was scheduled originally for June 11th. They get to the field. It's been raining for days in Charleston. The drainage was not the best. The field conditions were adverse. And Atlanta's been dealing with adverse field conditions throughout the season. When they played in Costa Rica for their CONCACAF Champions League match, the field was very hard and below standards. Then they played in Columbus during a rainstorm with literal puddles on the field, and they played through that match, but it was I talked about it when it took place, that it was adverse conditions. They should have stopped the match. I mean, you had guys literally not the ball, kicking it in front of them, and the ball just stopping on the grass and trying to make tackles and sliding 10 feet on the ground and making hard tackles. Luckily, no one broke a leg or had any issues post-match. So Atlanta's very sensitive to the field conditions that they've been dealing with this year. So when you're in Charleston for the U.S. Open Cup, which is a major tournament, but you got to look at the grand scheme of your entire year. And for Charleston, too, because they're in the USL Championship, and they're trying to compete for respectability and championships at that level. It wasn't smart to play on that field, so the match was called. They tried to play on Wednesday on June 12th at the College of Charleston. It was pretty much like a Sports Inquirer tour. I've been to the stadium that the Battery play at, and then I worked at College of Charleston at Patriots Point. Respect to my Charleston people. I know exactly what they were trying to play. But once again, the rain was bad, and the field they could play in rain. They could play in a downpour. But if the field is not draining and it causes, they're grass fields as well, not synthetic turf or things like that. So they tried to play on that. It didn't work out. They took a bus back to Atlanta, ended up playing that match for the fourth round on, June 13th in Kennesaw at the Kennesaw State University, the campus. And they play Atlanta United 2 matches there, so there's some familiarity with the field, but still, you're trying to play this match and dealing with all the conditions. It was a unique situation. Furthermore, they were unable to have security, so they could not have fans at the match. So it was pretty much a friends and family match. Literally, I didn't go to the match, but there was literally media work, like the staff of both teams and the players. That's all that was in the stadium for the match. It was on online. I was able to see it there. But it was a very unique situation. And the guys talk about it. I was able to get some post-game audio and them discussing it, manager Frank Boer and Merem about it. But the match itself, Brendan Vasquez scored 2 goals in extra time to lift Atlanta United to a 3-1 victory over Charleston. Atlanta trailed for the majority of the match and had a very lethargic form to them, but they were able to get the equalizer in the 78th minute off of a corner from it was a corner by Pity Martinez. Miles Robinson was able to retrieve it and headed it across goal, and Romario Williams was able to tap the ball in across the goal line to tie the match in the 78th minute. The rest of the regulation period went the 90 minutes was still 1-1. Vasquez scored his first. Well, the first goal came in the 110th minute of the extra time off of a pass by Justin Merem, and the second score was again a few minutes later by Merem. So Merem had 2 assists on the night on 2 of Vasquez's goals. So Atlanta was kind of able to survive in advance and find a way through. But let's hear from Justin Merem on the match and just his opinions on what happened out there. Let's see. Yep, all right, here we go. Justin Merem.
These games sometimes are harder to get up for. They're gonna, put everything out there. This is, their biggest game of the year, so they're gonna come out. And for us, we, sometimes the mentality, because it's not an MLS team, but give them credit. They were great, and kudos to them. But at the end, we, found a way. The game, you have to be locked in. Obviously, not the best start for us, but I thought. We dug in there and found a way to get a result, which was promising.
All right, now it's Justin Merem talking about the match. Obviously, him, Vasquez, Romario Williams, even Andrew Carlton, guys who have struggled to find consistent minutes with the first team, were able to play in the match. And for several reasons with the U.S. Open Cup, I should have explained this earlier. You have a limitation on your roster as far as international players go. Well, you can only have 5 international players on your roster that can play in the match. So that limits, and Atlanta has a very diverse international roster. So that limited some players who were unable to participate. Furthermore, you have Joseph Martinez. He's in the Copa America with Venezuela. And Tito Villalba is recovering from injury. And Ezequiel Barco is working his way back into form after his time with the U20 team for Argentina during the World Cup. And you want to get some rest for your other players, such as Leandro Gonzalez-Perez and Brad Guzan, Julian Gressel. None of those guys played in the match. So you're looking at a roster depleted for various reasons. Some of your top players who have been starting consistently were not playing in the match. So that's what they had to deal with. But it also gives opportunity to guys like Merem, who's working his way into the roster after a midseason trade, and Vasquez, and also Romario Williams. Joseph Martinez, may not be back for another few weeks with his commitment to Venezuela, and Atlanta has matches coming up. So you got to figure you need that top scorer or you need that top forward to be a scorer for the team, and that's where Vasquez and Williams are finding that opportunity now that both are healthy and ready to go. But let's hear from Frank de Boer, the manager of the team, on the victory.
We did it better in the first 20 minutes. I already said to the players after the game, it's a pity that we started 20 minutes too late. After that we had, we came into the game. We had our chances, maybe just not a little bit luck to score a goal. But then we showed character. But you have to start from the beginning. I already gave the example, about Chicago Fire. I know it's difficult games. I've played those games also many times, but multiple times. But still, you have to show character. And you cannot let them fool you 2 times. In the 20 minute, in the first 20 minutes, they had already a good chance in the beginning, and then we just gave it away, that goal. And and then we have to start. But they're gonna play deep, and we have to create our chances, and that's difficult. And we had some, especially in the second half, even better. But it was a hard game. Compliments, of course, for Charleston Battery, because they pushed us to the limit, and we did some extra training today, and that's maybe good for the guys, but I prefer normally that we do it in regular time to finish and win these games.
Was it weird playing in an empty stadium?
Yeah, everything doesn't help, of course. It's always in favor of the opponent who's the less favored, of course, and they want to play the game of the season because there's a lot of exposure. Of course, everybody's watching it, and they want to show themselves. And the only thing what we can do is losing. If you win, it's normal. If you lose, it's it's a disaster, and finally we had one, and we have to forget it and so as quick as possible and up to Columbus.
And that was manager Frank Boer talking about the victory. And yes, next up for Atlanta are the Columbus Crew. They play in the round of 16 matchup tomorrow on June 18th. So it's a match with two MLS teams, so maybe a little more even ground, or not necessarily equal competition, but two teams in a similar league, similar scenario. It's in Columbus, and I said it starts tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we'll be watching that, and we'll have plenty to discuss when that match takes place. Probably similar lineup that you saw in the Charleston matchup. Atlanta United 2 were not as fortunate in Kennesaw this week as they fell at home 5-0 to the Pittsburgh Riverhounds on June 15th. Pittsburgh opened scoring on the 4th minute off of the ball was cleared by Kevin Barajas, but it fell right into Robbie Mertz's feet at the top of the box, and he sunk in a low shot past the Atlanta goalkeeper to make the score 1-0. The Riverhounds doubled the score, or doubled their lead in the 7th minute after Stefan Dos Santos was able to score off a rebound from a Nico Brett shot, and that made the score 2-0. And the score went to 3-0 or 3-0 later on in the 13th minute when Brett finished off a strong move and had a shot to the bottom left corner of the net, and once again went past the Atlanta goalkeeper. It was 3-0 lead within the first 15 minutes of the contest. So very slow start for Atlanta. Let's hear from Captain Jack Metcalf on that 3-0 deficit and the team trying to work its way back from that difficult start to the match.
Obviously, it's not ideal, I think we had a couple of lapses in concentration, and kind of took us by surprise because before the game, everybody felt good. Everybody was really excited for the game, and just a couple of lapses in concentration, and the first one's kind of hard luck. It's tough, you go down 3-0, but to be honest, I think we responded well for the rest of the half, and we dominated from then on, even though we were 3-0 down. So respect and credit to all the guys for keeping their heads up. And then look, in the second half, obviously 3-0 down, you're going to try and push, and I think when we tried to push, we got punished for that.
Was there struggles on the defensive backfield? No Campbell, no Conway. Guys have been playing consistently in the back line. They did not play tonight. Was that maybe just a factor, having some new guys struggling with some continuity?
No, I think anybody can step in and do their roles and do their jobs, no matter if they haven't played minutes. That's been a theme throughout the year and throughout Atlanta United 2's history. People have stepped in after not playing 10, 15 games and done great. So I don't think that's an issue. I just think it comes down to a little bit of concentration in the areas and being a little bit cleaner in our box. But I think overall, although we gave up 5 goals, we got to take the positive from it. We never give up. We kept fighting, and that's something that is important to us, and we kept going, no matter what the score is. Of course, naturally heads are going to be down. You lose a game by 5 goals, but I think as a group we've got to take as much as we can from it, and look the mistakes in the face and say, we can't keep giving up goals ourselves. If a team slices through us and has a wonder goal, then fair enough. But if we're having some lapses of concentration, that's on us, and we've got to keep looking that mistake in the face and continue to work on it until we get it right.
And that was Jack Metcalf, once again captain for Atlanta United 2. And as he mentioned, they were down 3-0 pretty quickly in the contest, and Pittsburgh added 2 more goals, including an own goal in the 76th minute by Atlanta to make the score 5-0, and that was the final. Atlanta played with a limited roster, in essence, due to the first team's Gold Cup obligations, as we went over a few minutes ago, and plus the unavailability of Jackson Conway and George Campbell, the 2 teenagers who've been playing consistently for the team. Conway as forward, Campbell as defender. Those guys have started a lot of matches. They were unavailable as well for Atlanta United 2. So just a roster of adjustments, and you had guys like Mikey Ambrose and trying to work his way into fitness, and you also had just a lot going on there. And Chris Goslin, he made his first appearance of the year as well. So the Atlanta was working with a lot of different pieces and trying to figure it all out. And here is Coach Glass on the match.
Everybody's had a few first touches, could have been better, a few passes played that are misplaced. Just little fine details that, especially in the final third, are going to cost you. We get the group, we're getting into good positions, good areas to be dangerous, and just the little final bit just wasn't quite there. It's obviously more difficult against a good organised team that's 3 goals up on you. They can sit in a little bit more, but in terms of the effort, work rate, everything else that we ask from the lads, not caving in at 3-0 against a really, really good team. Sounds crazy to say didn't cave in and it ends up 5, but they didn't. I think we really had to go. The fourth goal, is it in, is it not? I don't really know. Then the last one's an own goal. If Lawrence doesn't slide, the kid probably scores anyway. So he can't do right. So it's some good points in there within it, which is always a positive. But you can't take away we lost 5-0. It hurts, but it's a motivational tool for next week.
Yeah, so Atlanta has now gone 5 matches without a win. They had 3 straight road draws and have now dropped their last 2 home contests, including that 5-0 loss to Pittsburgh. So they are preparing to face Indy 11 in Indianapolis on June 21st. We'll have another show before this, so we'll break down that matchup a little bit more. It's interesting to note from them, they actually had Lucas Oil Stadium, the same arena or stadium that the Indianapolis Colts play at. So it has to be the largest capacity for a USL championship team playing in a football stadium, because we've had teams like Cincinnati move up over the past few years. So very unique scenario for the Atlanta United 2 playing on that field. And I said we'll preview that matchup as we get closer to it later on this week. And as far as Women's World Cup goes, we'll focus on the United States. They've been dominant so far. They've outscored opponents 16-0. They started off with a 13-0 win over Thailand and won yesterday 3-0 over Chile. So they've moved on to the round of 16. But it's been more about the antics or discussion of the antics, quote antics, not off the field, but post-match celebrations and, quote, running up the score. And this is where you get people who are not familiar with international soccer, especially a tournament like this, and thinking that, oh, this is ugly Americans, we're embarrassing the opponent. Here's the deal with these type of tournaments. One, the United States, and it's weird because the United States, we talk about the men's side, and them, seems like for decades, trying to get themselves into a top 5, top 10 team. The United States is the equivalent of the Germany, the Brazil, or Italy, when they're going, of the women's side. They've won multiple World Cups. They're top 3, top 4 team in the world. Right now, I think technically they're number 1 in the rankings. So they are a top team. So it's unique. It's kind of a flip of the men's side, that the women are the most known and premier team in the tournament. So I think that kind of adds a twist to it that we're not used to. People who are not familiar with soccer, they assume that, oh, it's the United States of soccer, they're not too good. No, these women are legitimate and are the top of the world as far as it goes. 2, you have to look at it this way: when they're in group stages, so they want to win their group, and there's a goal difference, and that's a tiebreaker for scenarios to advance. Now you figure, some people say, oh, if it's 6 or 7-0, you have enough goals to advance. I can kind of see that perspective, but you're trying to score as many goals as you can to put yourself in a comfortable position. And also, it's sports. These women have worked for years to get to this position. If they're going to celebrate, let them celebrate. If it was high school or even college, I may have a little bit of an issue with it. But these are professionals. The Thailand women are professionals. The U.S. women are professionals. If you don't want them to score 13 goals, don't let them score 13 goals. So I had no issues with the celebration. It's one of those things where I think you want people to criticize the sport or find the contrarian way we're in a debate era. If you turn on your ESPN, your Fox Sports, whatever network, or even your local radio station, or if you listen to a national show or podcast, there's always that person that's trying to be the opposite of, because it's simple to just analyze things, look at it objectively. To really get your numbers up and to get attention, you want to be the contrarian. And being contrarian, especially if you're a contrarian on an American broadcast, or if you're American and being contrarian to the United States, oh, you're a rebel. You're being anti-establishment, anti-social. No, you're not. You're just trying to drive up your ratings, your numbers, whatever the equivalency is that you determine to be, I'm getting attention. Now, if it was reverse, then it'd be, oh, this is a travesty. It'd be a complete opposite perspective if it was reversed. So I had no issues with the celebrating at all. It's going to be very interesting as they advance through the tournament. Even now, granted, they did win the second match through nothing over Chile with kind of the bench roster, or the bench players getting the start. So that the score wasn't as big, but they're going to face stiff competition from some of the European teams and some of the Asian teams as well. The U.S. usually steps up and does very well in this tournament, even though you see other rosters maybe just as good or even better. But it's going to be interesting to see now when they face this different competition from the Japan, Germany, France. France is the home country or host country of the tournament. When they face some of those teams, we'll see what happens there. So that's my thought on the World Cup and what's been happening so far. They're still in the early stages of it, so we'll see what happens there. When we come back, we'll have our final segment of the show, Miscellaneous Department, and we'll break down some other outside news and notes in the world of sports here on the Sports Inquirer Show. All right, final segment of the show, Sports Inquirer Show, the Miscellaneous Department. The U.S. Open. The mechanics of it, Gary Woodland won the U.S. Open -13, 3 shots ahead of Brooks Koepka, who was going for his third straight U.S. Open championship. He finished at -10. I was not interested in this tournament at all, even though Koepka was kind of lurking towards the early part of the round. Respect to Woodland. He dominated from really, lead up 54 holes and carried it home towards the end. I just didn't think that it was interesting for several reasons. I thought Pebble Beach needed to play harder than it did. Seeing the U.S. Open with -13 and -10 and a lot of negative numbers of guys under par, I'm not saying it has to be brutal where guys are at even or +1 or +2 wins the tournament, and we've seen that happen before. But -13, that's a little much. The U.S. Open is supposed to be the toughest tournament in the world. The course is supposed to be made the hardest for any golfer to get low numbers, and the weather was perfect in Pebble Beach during the entire weekend. No winds, no rain. It was just, and the players took advantage of that, and I just did not see any adversity that the guys had to overcome that you expect from a U.S. Open. So I think the Pebble Beach played too well for the players. Woodland and Koepka, I know Koepka, you try to warm up to him. The guy is probably the best golfer in the world right now, but they don't bring the charisma. I don't want to say the Tiger excuse of him not being in the running is why people weren't interested, but it is a factor. If Tiger Woods is not in contention, it does lessen the interest of it. Also, the West Coast, it was on the West Coast, so the times were unique. We talked about a few shows ago. We did our post-Masters recap. I enjoyed having prime golf taking place early in the afternoon. I'm in the East Coast. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia, so we're Eastern Standard time zone. And to have the critical round take place from 9 a.m. to about 1 or 2 p.m. was perfect. It didn't ruin your Sunday. And having the West Coast time with the final round really starting around, I think, 3 or 4 o'clock, and having it lead, at least for contenders, your final 5 or 6 group of golfers, and then having the final hole conclude around 10 o'clock or 10:30, that's a little late, especially on Sunday night. I'll admit, I watch 90 Day Fiancé. I have TV viewing issues, but it's a good show. It's a train wreck, but it entertains me. But that's Sunday prime time viewing for myself. And then you have a lot of the shows on HBO and Showtime, whether you're watching Billions or Little Big Liars, I believe the show is on HBO. There's a lot of people I know watch. Euphoria premiered. You have all of that going on. And I know Showtime to premiere one of their big dramas that they expect a lot of big things from this summer. Sunday night's a lot of prestige TV time. I think Walking Dead was on as well. You add all of that together, and golf does not fit that 8 to 10 p.m. time frame as far as what you're trying to watch during that time. And I think that the time was off. Like I'm so used to with the golf, really between 12 and 7 p.m. I'll give you that time on a Sunday. Earlier the better for me, but I'll give you 12 to 7 as far as a major tournament going on. When you still have the major golf or the guys in contention, not even in the back 9, and it's 8 o'clock, I can't do it. Or it's tougher for me to do it. So that's, I think, why the interest in it was low. I'm interested to see what the ratings are and what other people thought about it. I did watch the Tyson Fury fight on ESPN Plus. I've caved in. I got it. I could work through it. I was caving in because I already have Netflix, and that's a good thing. And we'll get to our Netflix shows in a minute. But man, I already have cable, dealing with that, and having to pay for other subscriptions, I'm a little leery of it. But I did check it out for Fury, and easy win over Schwartz to retain the lineal heavyweight title. We've gone over the whole lineal titles versus the other organizations and who's champion in the heavyweight division. Complete mess. It's confusing for a lot of people because you see Deontay Wilder with the belt, and then you see Ruiz. He beat Joshua last week, and he's holding a bunch of belts. It's like, cool. Then all of a sudden you see Tyson Fury. He has no belts, and he's coming to be a champion. Or he has something as well. It's just a lot of belts, a lot of confusion. But the fight itself, he did what he had to do, took care of him in 2 rounds. He looked very good. Fury's a guy who's dealt with inactivity for physical reasons and mental. So the more he fights, the better. That's a good thing. He says he wants to fight, I think, in the fall, in October, and then do the rematch against Wilder maybe early 2020. It's a long time away, but not necessarily. It'll be here before we know it. But it's good that he stayed active. Even though Schwartz was an inferior opponent, he just needs to stay. And he came in heavy. You could tell his training maybe not been at peak form, but at least he showed up and he looked okay. The hands were good. He dodged 4 straight punches in the second round. That was very impressive. So it shows that his mind is right as far as being in the ring. A spectacle in a good way. Tyson Fury, first time fighting in Las Vegas. He embraced the United States, had the Apollo Creed, I guess, U.S. trunks that we've seen from Rockies and movies in the past. So he kind of played that up as well with Gypsy King on the front. He's very proud of his gypsy heritage in the United Kingdom. So we saw all of that. He sang Aerosmith afterwards. So the point is he played it to the crowd and really put himself out there. And ESPN has, I believe, numbers up to $100 million deal with Fury, and he's going to fight on ESPN exclusively, which stinks because now we're probably going to deal with more of the hand-wringing of the boxing because you have, I think Joshua is on Showtime and DAZN with Wilder, so all these networks get in the way of these fights happening consistently in the heavyweight division. But ESPN is a big marketing tool. Fury, they're putting a lot of money into Fury, so as long as he keeps winning and brings intrigue to the heavyweight division, I think it'll be all right. So I enjoyed watching the fight, and so it's pretty straightforward affair, but we'll see what happens there. Finally, I was able to catch up on some Netflix shows. I've been teasing I need to do a separate show of what I'm watching, but I'll give you a list of things that I saw kind of over the past week or so since we did a show because we're kind of heading towards an hour mark and we're about to wrap the show up. I saw First and Last, which is a show about prisoners. Not prisoners, people going to jail. There's a difference between jail and prison. But it's based in Gwinnett County, Georgia, which is a suburb of Atlanta, so I have to watch when I'm in Gwinnett. But no, the show premise really is you have people their first day in jail, they were arrested for whatever reason, and you see them in the holding cell and being booked to go to jail. And if and the way jail works, at least Gwinnett was, I don't know if you're listening in your part of the country or the world how it works, but you're arrested for charge with whatever, DUI, battery, stealing, robbing, whatever you're doing. So you're put in the jail, and you usually have about 48 hours to post bail. If you don't post bail, you get processed, and then you're put in the jail itself. Once you're put in the jail itself, it's a lot harder to get out because you're waiting for your trial. So they had people in their first day in jail. Some people were able to post bond and get through and all of that stuff. But then you have people who just didn't have the money, or you saw some really bad family relationships. By the way, love your mother. If you're a mother or father, love your children. Every family, every prisoner, or I shouldn't say prisoner, it seemed like every jail person had a broken relationship with their family. It was really sad to see. It was real, though. And but if you can't, we saw some guys who couldn't make the money or the bail end up in jail. And some did 30-day bids, 60 days, 90, whatever. And we saw the last day for some people. They were able to be processed out. They're out of jail. A lot of these were no murderers. Well, they had one guy who was a murderer, but he was they showed the other side, like the really extreme end of things, that if you murdered and you had no bail, you were stuck there for a very long time. But everyone else, there was kind of first or second offenses, a lot of probation violations, which is dumb as well. If you're on probation, check in with your parole officer. Simple things like that. So these were like 30 to 60 day bids. So you saw them when they processed out and they were able to get out. So you saw first and last. That was the premise of the show. It just makes you not want to violate the law and not commit a crime. And these were all guilty people for the most part. We didn't see any innocent deals as far as people being arrested unfairly. It was pretty straightforward stuff. As I said, there's a lot of probation violations, so you've already been charged before, things like that. But yeah, watch that show. You don't want to go to jail because the conditions they're borderline inhumane. And then you see the people that are around you, not good stuff. I saw Black Mirror. The new season premiered. I have to delve deeper into it. I need to watch the episodes for a second time. Every time I watch a Black Mirror, I watch the first time and I'm always like, that was okay. But then I watch it a second time and I'm more intrigued by it, and I can see a lot deeper. I missed a lot of the eggs, the little hidden storylines and little clues on them. So I need to watch it again. But I will say, if I could give you an impression right now, I was underwhelmed by this season. Felt like it was a little bit rushed because you usually see these seasons during Christmas time, but we already had Banderdash, which I thought was which was the interactive Black Mirror episode, and then we had these 3 new ones come up. They were very rushed. They had a lot of celebrities in it. Miley Cyrus was a star, one of them. Anthony Mackie was in another one, which is cool. I mean, that's good. We've had celebrities before. When I say celebrities, more known actors, at least in the United States. But yeah, I thought it was a little bit rushed. Some of them a little bit confusing. Like I said, I need to watch them again, and check it out. What I didn't expect to get into was a show called Awake, a game show where they have contestants stay up for 24 straight hours doing a menial task of counting quarters and having to keep count of how much they have accumulated over that 24-hour period in a room. And then they go onto a stage for a game show, and they have to compete in these wacky activities, silly ones. I'm only 3 episodes into it, but silly things like threading a needle, having to use your reflexes to catch money falling down on the ground that you normally be able to do pretty easily. But after 24 hours and no sleep, you're struggling with it. It's a good show, easy watching, good charismatic game show host, good backstories, things like that. And in essence, if you could complete all the tasks, you win $1 million. But so it's one of those Netflix shows. There's so many dark shows on there that I watch, and a lot of grimy, from Narcos to Orange is the New Black to When They See Us, which I haven't watched yet because I got to be in the right mood for it. I watch a lot of the dark shows, but I was like, I'll give a silly game show a chance. So it was good light viewing overall. But as I said, that's what I did this weekend as far as watching on Netflix. If you have any thoughts on those, give us a shout. And also anything else that you need to contact us, here's how you do it. You go to sportsinquirer.net, premier site with news notes in the world of sports, as I say 1,000 times. Twitter and Instagram, go to Sports Inquirer. That's all one word. Facebook, The Sports Inquirer. And as I said, we're going to resolve that Sports Inquirer kind of 2 different pages on Facebook. Just search out Sports Inquirer. Whichever one you do, subscribe to it, and I'll make it happen as far as making sure you're transferred over and we may get that going. And then finally, YouTube and SoundCloud. Go to The Sports Inquirer. Those separate ways to get our archives of the past, present, and future. Hopefully we do another show within the next 24 to 48 hours. If there's anything that I haven't talked about that you want us to delve into, please give us a shout as well, and we'll go from there. Until next time.